Scott and Melissa Carter set out on what was supposed to be a romantic anniversary getaway in their custom camper, but only one of them came back days later. Melissa's dismembered body was discovered buried in a cooler deep in the woods, and the truth behind their perfect marriage unraveled in horrifying detail. What seemed like a loving trip quickly turned into a calculated nightmare. This is the chilling true crime story of a husband's twisted plan, a missing wife, and the camper that became a crime scene. Scott and Melissa Carter had been married for 6 years, and to anyone looking from the outside, they seemed like the perfect couple. They lived in a modest home in upstate New York, surrounded by trees, friendly neighbors, and a reputation for being kind, quiet, and easygoing. Scott was a 38-year-old auto mechanic who had spent the last decade working at a local garage. Melissa, 35, was a part-time art teacher at a nearby community center. Together, they shared a love for the outdoors, weekend hikes, road trips, and long nights under the stars. For their 6th wedding anniversary, Scott planned something special. He had spent months renovating a second-hand camper van. He told friends he wanted to surprise Melissa with a week-long trip to the Catskill Mountains. She had always loved camping, and they hadn't taken a real vacation in over a year. He installed shelves, added curtains, set up a small kitchenette, and he even created a sleeping nook with lights overhead that resembled stars. Melissa seemed thrilled by the idea. They left on a crisp Friday morning in early September, snapping a cheerful photo in front of the van before they set off. Melissa posted it online with a simple caption, "Adventure awaits." The first 2 days of the trip appeared uneventful. Melissa sent a few photos to her sister Amanda, pictures of a sunrise, her coffee mug beside a lake, and one blurry selfie with Scott sitting by a fire. Amanda responded happily, assuming her sister was enjoying the trip. But by Tuesday, things grew quiet. Amanda noticed Melissa hadn't responded to her last message. She assumed maybe they had lost signal in the mountains. By Wednesday, however, worry started to set in. Melissa had missed a virtual art class she was supposed to host for local children. That was unlike her. She was never careless about her responsibilities. Amanda tried to reach her, again still no answer. Then she tried Scott. He responded hours later, saying they were still camping and probably heading back by Thursday. He blamed the lack of signal for the silence and said everything was fine. But Amanda wasn't convinced. The tone of Scott's message was strange, cold, even. She decided to call the local authorities and report Melissa missing, although Scott insisted Melissa had simply gone hiking alone and hadn't returned. Law enforcement knew time was critical. A search team was dispatched to the general area where Scott claimed they had camped. On Thursday night, Scott returned to town alone. He parked the camper in their driveway and told neighbors Melissa had wandered off during a hike 2 days earlier and never came back. When asked why he hadn't stayed and continued searching, he said he didn't know what else to do. The explanation raised eyebrows. Why would a husband leave the woods while his wife was still missing? Soon, investigators took a closer look at Scott's version of events and what they found inside. That camper would change everything. The camper van, once a symbol of the Carters' adventurous spirit, quickly became the focus of the investigation. When Scott returned home alone and offered a vague explanation about Melissa's disappearance, detectives requested access to the vehicle. Scott didn't resist. He handed over the keys and repeated his story. They had parked near a secluded trailhead. Melissa went for a solo morning hike, and she never came back. He claimed he searched for hours before giving up and driving home, but law enforcement found his behavior troubling. Instead of waiting for help or contacting authorities immediately, Scott had packed up camp, driven home calmly, and only responded to texts when pressed. The timeline didn't add up. Officers examined the camper inside and out. At first glance, everything looked clean, too organized for a couple that had supposedly been living there off-grid for several days. The bed was perfectly made. The floor was spotless. There were no signs of mud, clutter, or even casual use. When investigators opened the bathroom cabinet, they found heavy-duty cleaning supplies, bleach, ammonia, scrub brushes, and gloves. That alone wasn't suspicious, but chemical testing of the bathroom sink and shower revealed something more concerning. Blood residue, faint but present. The samples were taken for lab analysis. A hidden compartment under the camper's bed yielded a black trash bag stuffed with clothing. The garments inside were Melissa's. Some were torn and several were soaked in blood. Police also learned Scott had recently installed a small security system inside the camper. It wasn't connected to a live feed but recorded motion-triggered clips to a memory card. That memory card had been wiped. Forensics experts, however, managed to recover fragments of deleted files. One short clip showed Melissa moving around the camper late Monday night. She looked tense. Glancing toward the bathroom, there were no further clips after that. The blood evidence was a turning point. Investigators no longer treated Melissa's case as a missing persons report. It was now considered a possible homicide. A formal search warrant was issued for Scott's house. Detectives combed through his garage and found more unsettling clues: a large hunting knife, stained tools, and traces of bleach on the workbench. Inside a bedroom drawer, Melissa's wedding ring and earrings were discovered wrapped in tissue paper. When questioned about them, Scott said he had packed them for safekeeping. His explanations began to crumble. He insisted he was innocent, that Melissa must have gotten hurt or lost in the forest. But he couldn't answer why he cleaned the camper, or why there were no signs of distress calls or genuine panic. He never mentioned the blood. He never offered to assist in the ongoing search. As pressure mounted, a team of officers returned to the last known campsite, about 10 miles from the area, behind a thicket of pine trees. Search dogs alerted their handlers. Beneath a mound of leaves and freshly turned soil, officers uncovered a locked cooler. When it was opened, the scene was horrifying. Several body parts, wrapped in plastic, confirmed to be human. DNA would later confirm the worst. It was Melissa Carter. The discovery of Melissa Carter's dismembered remains in the buried cooler sent shockwaves through the community. What had once been a puzzling missing persons case quickly evolved into one of the most gruesome homicide investigations the region had ever seen. Investigators focused all attention on Scott Carter. His calm demeanor, evasive statements, and questionable behavior painted a disturbing picture of a man hiding something far darker than anyone had imagined. Back in town, detectives turned to those who knew the Carters best. Friends, neighbors, and family members began revealing pieces of a puzzle that, when assembled, told a chilling backstory. Melissa, it turned out, had been struggling in her marriage for more than a year. Her sister Amanda described late night phone calls in which Melissa confessed she no longer felt safe with Scott. She had hinted at emotional distance, sudden outbursts, and a creeping sense of fear in their home. Though she never described physical violence, her tone had become more urgent in recent weeks. She was thinking of leaving him. Investigators uncovered that Melissa had met with a divorce attorney just 2 weeks before the anniversary trip. She had also started transferring small amounts of money into a private account, preparing for what looked like a quiet exit from her marriage. Scott, perhaps unknowingly, might have sensed a change. Police found printed directions in Scott's car from his home to a location far from their supposed anniversary destination, suggesting that the trip had a secondary purpose from the beginning. Digital forensic analysts retrieved damning evidence from Scott's phone and laptop. In the weeks leading up to the trip, he had searched topics like how to destroy DNA evidence, how long to dissolve a body in bleach, and how deep to bury a cooler. These searches were time-stamped late at night, all from the privacy of his garage. Scott had also ordered several large plastic tarps, industrial-strength trash bags, and cleaning products online, all delivered days before the camping trip. When confronted with this evidence, Scott claimed he had no intention of harming Melissa. He said they had been fighting, that she fell and hit her head during an argument, and that in a panic, he tried to cover it up. But the medical examiner's report destroyed that version of events. Melissa had died from blunt force trauma to the head, with multiple repeated strikes. There were also defensive wounds on her arms, suggesting a struggle The dismemberment occurred after death, using tools consistent with those found in Scott's garage. Even more incriminating, GPS data placed Scott's phone at the burial site early Tuesday morning, the exact day he claimed. Melissa had simply gone hiking. It became clear to everyone that the trip had never been about reconnecting or celebrating. It was planned, calculated, premeditated. As prosecutors prepared charges, media outlets picked up the story. The public was horrified by the details. A marriage anniversary used as a cover for murder. A husband who returned home and pretended nothing was wrong. A camper van turned into a crime scene. And a young woman whose only mistake was trusting someone she thought she knew. Scott Carter's trial began 5 months after his arrest, and it quickly became one of the most closely followed court cases in the state. The media dubbed it the camper murder, and every gruesome detail made headlines. Courtroom seats were filled daily, and the public watched with morbid fascination as the story of Melissa Carter's final days was laid bare. What had started as an anniversary trip ended with a funeral, and now justice was being sought. The prosecution methodically built their case. They began with the timeline, piecing together Scott's movements before, during, and after the trip. GPS data, phone records, and surveillance footage painted a precise picture. Scott had driven Melissa to a secluded campsite on Friday. By Monday night, she was dead. On Tuesday morning, he was caught on a wildlife camera driving on a rarely used trail that led near the burial site. Prosecutors argued this wasn't panic or confusion, it was premeditation. Next, they presented digital evidence. Scott's online search history included chilling entries: how to dismember a body, best cleaning agents for blood, and how long before a body smells. They also showed purchases of gloves, bleach, and zip ties. One item, a heavy-duty cooler, was bought online and matched the exact one found buried in the woods. These purchases were made days before the trip, further supporting the claim that Scott had planned the killing well in advance. Then came the emotional testimony. Melissa's sister Amanda took the stand, recounting their final phone call. She shared how Melissa had sounded nervous, explaining she didn't want to go on the trip but felt pressured by Scott. Amanda also testified about the secret divorce plans and how Melissa had started moving money to prepare for separation. Her testimony was quiet but devastating. The courtroom was silent as she described receiving the call from police, confirming her sister's remains had been found. The medical examiner gave graphic but critical details. Melissa had been struck multiple times in the head with a blunt object. She had defensive wounds on her arms and hands, suggesting she tried to protect herself. Her body had been dismembered with tools consistent with those found in Scott's garage. The process had taken time, effort, and knowledge of anatomy, adding to the premeditation claim. Scott's defense team attempted to argue that Melissa's death was accidental. They said the couple had fought, Melissa fell and hit her head, and Scott panicked. But under cross-examination, Scott's version fell apart. He couldn't explain the blood cleanup, the pre-trip purchases, or why he buried her remains in a remote area. The jury listened, unmoved. After a 3-week trial, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. Scott showed little emotion as the sentence was read life in prison without the possibility of parole. Melissa's family wept quietly. Justice had been served, but their loss remained. The camper that once symbolized adventure was now remembered as a cage of horror, and Scott Carter, once a husband and partner, would be remembered only as a killer who used love as his final lie. In the months following Scott Carter's conviction, the shock of Melissa's brutal death began to settle into something deeper: quiet, enduring grief. Her family, especially her sister Amanda, found it difficult to move forward. The house where Melissa once lived was eventually sold. Her personal belongings were packed away. Some donated, others kept in sealed boxes. But the shadow of what happened remained over everyone who had known her. Melissa had touched many lives. As an art teacher, she had inspired children to express themselves creatively. After her death, the community center where she taught held a memorial and dedicated a mural in her honor. It showed a rising sun over a mountain landscape, one of Melissa's last photographs from the trip. Beneath it, in careful handwriting, were the words "in memory of beauty, courage and truth." Amanda took over as guardian for Melissa's cat, her journals, and a few saved paintings Melissa had never sold. She also launched a small foundation in Melissa's name, focused on supporting women in controlling or unsafe relationships. Donations poured in after the trial aired on national true crime segments. Though it didn't erase the loss, Amanda believed her sister's story could still protect others from facing the same fate. Meanwhile, Scott Carter's name became a symbol of deception in prison. He was kept under close watch due to threats from other inmates and his high-profile conviction. He granted no interviews and showed no interest in appealing the sentence. Investigators later confirmed that Scott had been in debt, feared losing his job, and believed Melissa's departure would ruin him financially and socially. The anniversary trip had not been spontaneous. It was his final attempt to control a situation that was slipping away. Public interest in the case remained high. True crime documentaries, podcasts, and online forums dissected the timeline, motives, and overlooked warning signs. Many debated whether Scott had shown signs of dangerous behavior earlier in the marriage. Some questioned why Melissa didn't leave sooner, but others reminded the public that emotional manipulation often works quietly, eroding confidence and silencing fear until it's too late. For the local community, Melissa's murder was a harsh reminder that appearances could be deceiving. Neighbors who had once admired the Carters' seemingly happy relationship now admitted they had seen small signs, arguments behind closed doors, forced smiles, long silences at public events. No one had imagined it would end like this. Every year, on the anniversary of Melissa's death, Amanda visits the Catskill Mountains and leaves a bouquet of sunflowers at the trailhead, where the camper was last parked. It's quiet there, the kind of place Melissa had always loved. She stands in silence, reflecting not just on what was lost, but on how Melissa's story now lives on, not as a tale of tragedy, but as a call for awareness, strength and justice. Though the crime was horrific, Melissa Carter is remembered, not by the way her life ended, but by the light she brought to others while she lived.